The buffalo was helplessly trapped under the helicopter, emitting pitiful cries, its eyes filled with despair. Seeing this, a woman immediately rushed over to help, but despite her best efforts, the helicopter wouldn't budge. Then, suddenly, the helicopter was lifted up. The woman was stunned to see an enormous gorilla, none other than the famous Kong. Kong had inherited the name passed down by his ancestors. He was still a young adult. The buffalo moved beneath her as if it were her pet. The woman was trembling with fear. Kong had killed most of her companions when she first arrived on the island. Yet Kong didn't attack her. Kong could sense that she was a kind-hearted woman. But why did Kong kill others? A few days earlier, scientists had discovered a mysterious island in the South Pacific. To investigate the island's ecosystem, they formed a special expedition team composed of special forces, weaver, scientists, and explorers. With the mission to explore the unknown, the group set out toward the mysterious island in high spirits. However, the journey was not as smooth as they had expected. When they were still dozens of kilometers away, they saw that the entire island was surrounded by storms, making it extremely dangerous. But the colonel was unwilling to give up, so he led everyone to drive their helicopters straight into the storm, seemingly throwing caution to the wind. Yet, despite the risks, they managed to enter the mysterious island unharmed. The interior of the island amazed everyone, as it had never been disturbed by outsiders, truly a paradise for wildlife and plants. As soon as humans arrived on the island, they started deploying seismic bombs to measure the island's geological environment. This, however, shattered the tranquility that had lasted for centuries. The animals on the island scattered in fear, but the scientists obtained the data they wanted. The island was indeed extraordinary. The entire island was hollow beneath, suggesting an underground world. Everyone was thrilled by this discovery, and meanwhile, the team deploying the bombs began bombing indiscriminately, severely disrupting the island's ecological balance. But this behavior of humans soon met with retaliation. Suddenly, a large tree flew through the air and struck a helicopter, destroying it. Why would a tree fly through the air? Before anyone could understand, another massive snake flew in, knocking down another helicopter. Amid the chaos, a gigantic eye locked onto them. They finally understood the answer. Their reckless bombing had angered this giant creature. In a fit of rage, it opened its massive jaws and swallowed a soldier whole. Under the glow of the setting sun, they finally saw the creature in full, a Kong, towering hundreds of meters high. Dozens of fighter planes immediately surrounded it. Yet in front of this colossal creature, the planes were like mere green flies. The soldiers quickly formed their ranks and launched a relentless attack on Kong. Though Kong was the ruler of this island, he was inherently kind-hearted, meant to live peacefully on the island. However, from the moment humans arrived, they started wreaking havoc and causing destruction. As the guardian of Skull Island, Kong could no longer endure this. He would not allow anyone to destroy his home. With a leap, Kong smashed a helicopter with one punch. In the face of such natural power, human strength was insignificant and utterly helpless. The rescue team on the ground was like ants, squashed by Kong's massive foot. But humans did not cease their assault. They intensified their firepower against Kong. Kong, unfazed, easily dodged, causing two planes to collide. As Kong fought back, the battle quickly turned into a one-sided massacre. The planes, in his hands, were like toys, tossed around carelessly. Within moments, the armed team suffered heavy casualties, seeing more and more helicopters destroyed by Kong. The surviving humans saw him as a demon. The colonel, watching his team fall one by one, was filled with hatred, vowing to make Kong pay in blood. As for these intruders, Kong's eyes blazed with fury, giving humans a fierce warning look. After the battle, Kong disappeared from their sight. Still full of fighting spirit, the team had come with dozens of people, but now more than half were gone. The survivors had been scattered by Kong and were forced to split into two small groups, leaving the colonel enraged. Originally about to retire, the colonel now found himself saddled with this disastrous mission. The more he thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong with this mission. So he confronted the expedition's organizer at gunpoint. Only then did he learn that this was no simple exploration mission. The professor's organization, Monarch, had long known about the presence of monsters on the island. The purpose of this expedition was to investigate evidence of these giant beasts. The bombing was meant to lure out these mysterious creatures, and now it had succeeded. Since the island was hollow below, there were likely more monsters. The colonel didn't care anymore. He had only one thought in his mind: to kill Kong. The team wanted revenge, but they didn't realize the island's dangers were only just beginning. As they entered a bamboo forest, one soldier, drinking from his canteen, looked up and was instantly horrified. The next second, his canteen fell, and he was impaled by a massive bamboo stalk. Everyone looked up along the bamboo stalk, only to see another monster. The limb piercing the soldier was the leg of a giant spider. The colonel frowned. This creature exceeded her expectations. The spider's bamboo-like legs were as sharp as swords. In the bamboo forest, it struck with lightning speed, prompting the soldiers to open fire, but the range was too far, causing minimal damage. Suddenly, the giant spider struck again, sending down several legs, pulling up one of the soldiers. His comrades tried to help but found it impossible to shoot accurately, leaving the soldier to fend for himself. At this moment, his comrades discovered the spider's long legs were fragile. They immediately ordered them all to be cut. As he approached death, the soldier summoned his last ounce of strength to sever the leg, freeing himself. The team seized this moment to target the spider's weak points. After a hail of bullets, the giant spider could no longer stand, its long legs now stumps, collapsing with a thunderous crash. The colonel, still unsatisfied, fired a few more rounds at the creature, as it had just cost them another comrade. Meanwhile, James, a field expert, led the research team toward the evacuation point. However, the isolated island was full of mysteries. A massive buffalo suddenly emerged from the water, leaving everyone stunned. As the buffalo advanced step by step, some raised their weapons in fear, but James quickly stopped them. Seeing that the group meant no harm, the buffalo simply gave them a stern look before turning back into the water. Following James' lead, they entered the jungle. There, they discovered a mysterious ruin. As Weaver lifted her camera to take a photo, a pair of eyes suddenly opened, startling everyone. It turned out that there were indigenous people on the island. They were quickly surrounded by the natives, and the group's hearts raced as they found themselves in a tense standoff. Fortunately, in the nick of time, a man dressed as a pilot named Hank appeared and stopped the confrontation from escalating. Hank explained to them that he was a pilot who had crash-landed here during World War II and was saved by a kind group of natives. He had been living there for 28 years. He had tried many times to leave Skull Island, but all attempts ended in failure. As the group followed him to the native village, a soldier who had separated from the group reached the river. There, he accidentally encountered Kong, a creature towering as high as a mountain. Seeing the giant beast again, the soldier was petrified. Kong merely glanced back at him, and the soldier was instantly paralyzed with fear. However, Kong showed no intent to harm him. Instead, he crouched down to inspect his own wounds. Clearly, the recent battle with humans had injured him as well. As he was about to drink from the river, he suddenly sensed danger in the water. He reached in with his massive hand and pulled out a gigantic octopus. It seemed that no animals on this island were of normal size. Originally, Kong had only come to drink water, but he was suddenly ambushed by a giant octopus lurking beneath the surface. Countless tentacles wrapped around him tightly. As he was about to be pulled into the water, Kong let out an angry roar. With a powerful stomp, he crushed the octopus's head. Fueled by his residual anger, Kong used his brute strength to tear the tentacles off his body. Then he casually sat in the water and began enjoying a feast of fresh octopus sashimi. Here, he was the king of the entire ecosystem, and even the giant octopus was merely another item on his menu. The soldier was relieved to have escaped. If Kong hadn't appeared, he would have been the octopus's luxurious meal. But before he could celebrate, a piece of wood suddenly came to life. It was actually a giant grasshopper, camouflaged perfectly. The soldier quickly picked up his gun and fired at it frantically. Surprisingly, the grasshopper did not attack but turned and fled, revealing an even greater danger behind it. Underneath the island lived another apex predator, the brutal and violent giant lizards, who were Kong's mortal enemies. Whenever they encountered Kong, a fierce battle ensued. These lizards had killed Kong's parents. Their bite was incredibly powerful, and they always moved stealthily. For this reason, Kong held a deep-seated hatred for them and aimed to eliminate them whenever they met. The two lizards they encountered now were not yet fully grown, so Kong quickly dealt with them. Led by Hank, James's team finally reached the native village. Though the indigenous people were not talkative, they were kind-hearted. They showed no malice toward the outsiders. After gaining their permission, Hank led them to the natives' sacred area and began explaining Skull Island's secrets. He revealed that the island's true threat was a terrifying giant creature called the Skull Lizard. These creatures hid deep underground and had nearly wiped out all the island's inhabitants in the past. The islanders had long lived in fear of being hunted by these giant lizards. To protect themselves, the natives had built walls hundreds of meters high to fend off the giant lizards, until a giant gorilla they called Kong appeared to fight them. For centuries, Kong had protected these weak natives, and they revered him as a guardian deity. Without Kong's presence, the skull lizards would have resurfaced, destroying everything on the island once again. But now, due to the team's explosives, not only would Kong view them as invaders, but there was a risk of awakening the largest and most powerful skull lizard deep underground. This creature had once devoured another pilot who had crash-landed with Hank. The team finally understood that their reckless exploration had not only caused heavy casualties but also nearly disrupted the island's ecological balance. Had they not encountered Hank and these friendly natives, their fate on this journey would likely have been grim. That night, the lonely Kong looked at the beautiful sky, a sorrowful expression on his face. During the quiet of night, he would often think of his family. The soldiers trudging through the swamp were still unaware of the island's situation. They planned to infiltrate Kong's lair and assassinate him to avenge their fallen comrades. Fueled by anger, the colonel was utterly furious, taking out his rage on a large bird, which caused panic among other large birds nearby. This foolish action quickly led to another person's death. The island's situation was exceedingly dangerous, so James's group was forced to evacuate. But the journey to the evacuation point was too long. It would take at least 3 days to reach it on foot. Fortunately, Hank had repurposed the wreckage of his crashed plane into a boat. He helped them repair the boat, which hadn't been operational for almost 30 years. Now, traveling by boat was much faster than walking. After saying goodbye to the native tribe that had been his companions for decades, Hank joined them on the boat to head to the evacuation point. Suddenly, a voice came over the radio. They had made contact with the colonel's group. The colonel fired a signal flare, revealing how close they were to each other. However, before they could celebrate, a scientist was suddenly snatched by 2 large birds. The team grabbed their guns to try to save him, but it was too late. The birds tore him apart mid-air in an instant. Helpless, they could only watch, suppress their sorrow, and press on toward the rendezvous point. Luckily, there were no further incidents along the way, and the long-separated groups finally reunited. The joy of reuniting quickly faded. The original plan was to retreat to the north of the island, but the colonel, blinded by vengeance, insisted on heading west under the pretense of rescuing a missing soldier. Ignoring all warnings, unable to dissuade him, James and the others compromised. They decided to search westward, but if they found nothing by nightfall, they would return and head to the northern evacuation point. The western side of Skull Island, however, was fraught with danger, and they unknowingly entered the territory of the skull lizards. The ground was littered with the remains of various animals, and 2 enormous skeletons lay in front of them, which were evidently the remains of Kong's parents. This was likely the lair of the skull lizards. The group readied their weapons and proceeded cautiously. One soldier carelessly tossed a cigarette butt on the ground, which triggered a small explosion. The area was filled with flammable gas, and a sudden roar alerted the group to danger. They quickly took cover, but as expected, they found themselves facing the dreaded skull lizard. This giant lizard, however, seemed to have a weak stomach, as it promptly vomited up a pile of bones. James recognized the dog tags among the remains. They belonged to the missing soldier they were searching for. After the lizard left, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Unaware of the lurking danger, the professor suddenly felt a chill down his back, and when they turned around, they immediately opened fire. But the lizard's skin was as tough as steel, making bullets ineffective. They deployed a heavy machine gun, but ultimately, the lizard counterattacked. Though it only had 2 legs, it moved with incredible speed, ambushing the group and devouring soldiers. Its gaping jaws could easily swallow a car whole. It then turned toward Weaver. As she was about to be eaten, the colonel ordered his men to use flamethrowers. Yet, even the powerful flames couldn't inflict fatal damage. The lizard retaliated with a swift tail strike, killing the soldiers. With no hope of escape, the group had no choice but to fight back. But the cunning, brutal lizard continued to devour the soldiers one by one. In a desperate moment, Weaver ingeniously ignited the gas on the ground with her lighter, successfully blasting the lizard. Seeing the dead lizard, Hank warned that this was only the smallest one. The largest was still lurking and advised them to flee. The colonel, however, was still determined to continue the search. James produced the dog tags found in the lizard's vomit, proving the soldier had died, urging the colonel to head back. But the colonel persisted westward. It turned out that the search for the soldier was a mere excuse. He knew that the supply plane held an arsenal of bombs. His real goal was to exact revenge on Kong. The group tried to emphasize Kong's importance, but the colonel was too consumed by hatred. He blamed Kong for the deaths of his men and was determined to make Kong pay. Convinced that humans should be the island's true rulers, the soldiers, bound by duty, followed orders without objection. However, The scientific team members urged him to stop, warning that the encounter with even a single skull lizard had been devastating, let alone facing the powerful Kong and the largest skull lizard. As tensions rose and neither side would relent, James suggested a compromise. The colonel and his men could proceed with their vengeance, while he escorted the scientists back to the boat. With that, the recently reunited groups separated once more. The colonel led his team to the crash site, where they gathered gasoline and heavy weaponry, setting a trap to burn Kong by pouring gasoline into the river. James and Weaver climbed to a mountaintop to survey the area and unexpectedly encountered Kong patrolling his territory. However, Kong didn't attack them. In his eyes, they saw kindness, resignation, and loneliness. He wasn't a mindless beast but a creature with a sense of duty. Weaver bravely reached out and touched Kong's fur. Under the soft moonlight, they exchanged no words, but their gazes conveyed mutual understanding. A feeling of awe and wonder stirred within them. A sudden explosion drew Kong's attention. Seeing the outsiders causing trouble again, Kong was utterly enraged. Watching Kong walk into the colonel's trap, James resolved to save his new friend. As Kong approached, the colonel ignited the gasoline, setting the entire lake on fire amid a series of explosions. Kong's body was engulfed in flames, and he roared in pain, enraged by humanity's renewed provocation. After a struggle, Kong was severely injured and finally collapsed. The colonel set up explosives around him to avenge his fallen comrades. Just as he was about to achieve victory, James and the others arrived, standing between him and Kong, demanding that he drop the detonator. Despite James's efforts to reason with him, the colonel, blinded by hatred, refused to back down. Suddenly, the largest skull lizard emerged from the ground, having long been suppressed by Kong. It wasted no time in coming to finish off its injured foe. The humans had unwittingly aided it, so it didn't immediately chase the fleeing people. Hearing the lizard's roar, Kong's eyes snapped open. Amusingly, the foolish colonel stood his ground, still thinking of blowing up Kong. This only infuriated Kong, who immediately smashed the colonel into nothing with a single punch. The skull lizard then lunged at Kong, and a fierce battle ensued. Though they were of similar size, Kong's injuries put him at a disadvantage. The fight raged from night until dawn, with both trading countless blows before the lizard turned its attention to the humans, mistaking the fleeing bipeds for Kong's offspring. In a critical moment, one soldier stepped up, clutching 2 grenades, intending to take down the skull lizard with him. But the lizard wasn't that foolish, and though the brave soldier sacrificed his life, he didn't manage to injure the creature. Seeing this, the others turned and ran, but it was too late. The lizard opened its massive jaws, ready to swallow them whole. Just then, Kong descended from above, allowing the people to escape and clearing the battlefield for their final showdown. When only the 2 giant beasts remained on the battlefield, the fight reached its peak. Each saw the other as a mortal enemy. They unleashed fatal blows from the start, with the lizard locking onto Kong's throat with its massive jaws. But the last of the Kong lineage was no ordinary beast. He pried the lizard's jaws apart with brute strength, tearing them open like his ancestors had. However, the skull lizard's strength was formidable, so Kong resorted to grabbing its head and slamming it into a nearby mountain. Seeing the 2 giants evenly matched, Weaver scrambled up a hill and fired a flare into the sky. This was a call for help, signaling the others to return and aid Kong. If Kong lost, they would all be doomed. The Skull Island giants battled for what seemed like an eternity, with neither able to overpower the other. At a pivotal moment, Kong displayed human-like intelligence, yanking an enormous tree from the ground, stripping it of its branches to create a weapon, a massive staff. The 40-meter-long branch smashed into the lizard's mouth, nearly crippling it, but the lizard, with its thick hide, quickly recovered. It launched another attack, coiling its powerful tail around Kong, leveraging its flexible body to gain the upper hand in close combat. Kong staggered and was flung into the wreckage of a boat. Though it didn't harm him, Kong found himself entangled in chains, momentarily unable to free himself. The situation worsened as the skull lizard moved in, pinning him down with its massive foot, ready to finish its foe. At that moment, the humans sprang into action, attacking the lizard with machine guns to draw its attention. The sudden assault indeed diverted the lizard's wrath, and it abandoned Kong, lunging at the humans instead. From atop the hill, Weaver fired another flare, hitting the lizard in the ear. Though it didn't cause serious injury, it momentarily distracted the lizard, giving Kong a chance to catch his breath. With a powerful effort, he broke free from the chains and let out a thunderous roar. Just as Kong freed himself, he noticed the boat's propeller. Seeing the lizard closing in on the humans, he ripped the propeller from the boat, Wielding it like a flail with a swift swing, he slammed it into the lizard. The lizard shrieked in agony, and Kong, showing a surprising mastery of weaponry, quickly reeled the lizard in. He used the chains to restrain the lizard's neck, slamming it to the ground. Standing tall, he clamped the lizard's jaws shut, preventing it from biting. With the other hand, he wielded the propeller, delivering a flawless over-the-shoulder throw, then grabbed the lizard's tail and smashed it into a nearby cliff. In the chaos, Weaver was knocked off the cliff and plunged into the water below. Concerned for her safety, Kong moved to rescue her, but the lizard seized the chance to strike. However, Kong anticipated this, punching the lizard into the ground, then tearing the propeller from its body to use as brass knuckles. Within moments, Kong had beaten the lizard bloody, leaving it battered and nearly unconscious. Kong then reached into the water, pulling Weaver to safety, relieved to find her still alive. But in a shocking twist, the lizard regained consciousness and launched another attack, clinging to Kong with unyielding ferocity, its tongue stretching out to bite through his arm. Kong struggled to free himself but was ultimately caught in the lizard's bite. This infuriated Kong, who summoned his primal strength, ripping out the lizard's tongue and internal organs. With a final shudder, the skull lizard went limp, life fading from its body. Kong had avenged his fallen kin. Gently, he opened his massive hand to check Weaver's breathing and, finding her unharmed, gently placed her on the ground. He prepared to leave quietly, but Weaver regained consciousness. Kong paused, casting her a look filled with both warmth and a sense of responsibility. With a faint, slightly affectionate look, he turned and left with quiet dignity. The surviving humans sailed away from Skull Island. Meanwhile, Kong remained to continue his role as the island's guardian, protecting its balance and sustaining its unique ecosystem. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.